As we move through Mark's gospel, I hope that we notice some of the differences we're in year B right now, some of the differences from last liturgical year with Matthew's gospel. The thing about Mark's gospel is that it's very fast-paced. It's a shorter gospel. Jesus is constantly on the move. It's almost frenetic. He loves the word immediately. Mark is going to use the word immediately more than 40 times in his short 16 chapters. It's quick. It's on the move. It's kind of go, 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 go. Jesus is moving very quickly. So for us, this is good for us, modern on-the-go people. And one of the things, we're still in the first chapter. And so immediately from what we heard last Sunday of Jesus calling his disciples, we immediately move into this scene in Capernaum at the synagogue. And so this is Jesus' first public miracle. And this is first kind of on the scene, people hearing about him. So this is his big kind of opening moment. And what's so striking here, they go into the synagogue. It's the Sabbath. It's the day of rest. And anybody that knows about the scriptures, a man of authority could speak on the scriptures. And Jesus begins to speak, and everyone is struck because the scriptures unfold in what he says, and he speaks as one with authority. And it's kind of a dig here, which I love, where it says, and not as the scribes. They spoke authoritatively, as if they knew what was going on, but Jesus speaks differently with authority. And we get one of those immediatelys where it says, and immediately there was a man with an unclean spirit that cried out. And this word unclean, Mark could have wrote demon, but he writes unclean for a very particular reason. And that's because for the Jewish people, for someone to be ritually unclean meant that they weren't fit for worship. And so they had to go through the purifications in order to be able to be fit for public worship. So there's something here of the difference between good and evil, between clean and unclean is the willingness to worship, to adore, to love what is, to appreciate. The difference between the person that can just love something beautiful and someone who has to possess it, who has to take it, who has to control it. And if they can't have it, then they destroy it. That's the difference here is it's the unclean spirit because it cannot love the beauty of God. And so in front of the presence of Jesus, it cries out. And at that time, whenever the Jewish people, whenever there were these moments of exorcisms, it was always these really long prayers. But Jesus just says very shortly, quiet, come out of him. That's all he says. And it goes, right? With resistance, whining, but it goes. So this is Jesus' first kind of public moment on the scene in Mark's gospel. And what strikes everyone and what causes word to be spread about him is because he speaks as one with authority. And this is what I want us to look at and focus upon today because this is a really unpopular word, authority. And it's funny me talking about this because if you wanted me to not read a book growing up, all you had to do was assign it in school. If someone told me to do something, there's no way I was going to do it. And so this is a funny thing, and it's a very human thing for us as well, that if someone tells us to do something, we are much less likely to do it. We don't like being told what to do because authority seems like it constrains us. It takes away our freedom. For you to tell me to do something makes me less free. And added into the mix of this is the reality that, so often authority is abused then and today. The abuse of authority within politics, within family, within the church, just within society in general. Authority is abused, and so we can have kind of this mentality of anything with authority, anything that tells me what to do is bad and takes away my freedom. It makes me less free, and therefore, I need to resist it. I need to fight it. But on the human level, there's something very fascinating here because we resist it publicly, right? But on a human level, we seek this out. We seek this out. How popular today, we love experts. How much we love, people love the TED Talks and everything like that. We love people that speak with authority and we look to them. Or people that are kind of they want to fix it themselves, they don't want to spend the money. So they're looking on YouTube. They're looking to people with authority to tell them how to fix things. They look to others. We live this thing. We look for others with authority. And yet if it seems imposed, we resist it. And this is the very interesting tension, and the thing is that the truth is this seems like a bad word and something unpopular, but also on a human level, we need it. Like musically, for like a symphony, you need a composer. In order for the music to be more beautiful, you have to have a composer. You need a point of reference. You need someone to guide you in order for the beauty of the music to come out, in order for there to be harmony. Like, and I even think of, I was just reflecting on the experience of my friends, like growing up, my friends playing music and being with them. And I didn't play with them because I wasn't any good and I didn't want to practice. And practice felt like constraint, right? To sit down and actually do that and to be like limited in that moment, it felt like unfreedom. But I can't deny that watching them play, like them playing together and like jamming together, that they were capable because of the discipline to the craft, because they followed in some like mysterious way, they followed, like they listened to their teachers and they disciplined themselves. They were like followed the instrument. Like there was a greater freedom in the way that they played. Like they were more capable of expressing themselves musically through the discipline and the following of the instrument and the following of the authority of the teacher. So the discipline and the following of the authority in the music made them more free to express themselves through the music. And this isn't just music, like athletics as well. Like at first, like not being able to move around well, but the more that you discipline yourself physically and like follow the instructor, the more freedom you have in sport and play and whatever to like run faster, jump higher. That in following an authority, in disciplining yourself and being constrained in that way, you actually become more free. And this is the fascinating thing, because this is what Jesus is doing. Is when John the Baptist asks, he sent his disciples to ask who Jesus is, he says that he's come to liberate the captives. He's come to make people free. And so he speaks with authority. He leads with authority in order to make us more free, not less. So that like our life can be symphonic. It can be harmonious. Like beauty can come out of the following of his authority. This is the big thing, and this is the thing that we miss, because once again, there's so much of abuse of authority today, and it's such an unpopular word, and yet like on a human level, we desire this. Like we desire actually someone to lead us, to follow us, to help us to become more free. And that's Jesus's work. Like his work in commanding us and speaking with authority to us is to make us more free, not less. And actually, Deacon Bob has already heard me preach last night. I'm sorry. But we were talking about this, and he actually made this very beautiful point to me of, he was the same way where in literature class, a book was assigned, and like there's no way he was going to read it until he met that one teacher that loved his craft, right, and spoke with authority, and then he began to love it too and actually read the books and actually love them, and they became important to him. But it was through trusting that one who actually lived his craft with authority that he had the freedom to really love and like follow what those books were proposing. Like it wasn't lost to him. And that has been my experience as well. And like this has been my experience in the faith as well. As soon as I realized that when Jesus speaks to me with authority, when he calls me to do something, he's not trying to constrain me. He's not trying to take away my freedom, but he's actually trying to make me more free. As soon as I recognized that and that started to dig into my life, I become more capable of following him with affection. Still resisting sometimes, like that constraint. But like this capability to really follow emerges. This is the point. And like this is the thing for us today that like each of us has to individually ask is, and this is the part where very often like spouses nudge each other or like look to their kids. None of that. Like this is your problem. Before it's anybody else's, this is your problem. Is when Jesus speaks to authority to you. When he speaks to you with authority, what is your position in front of him? Is it with this, okay, like you are leading me to freedom. You are trying to save me from my captivity, or I will follow you. Or is it more like the unclean spirit that does what he says, but he does it crying out and trying to like torture the person and convulse like little kids, like, all right, I'll take out the trash, but I'm going to drag it the whole way through the house, like leaving, refuge on the ground, or garbage still on the ground. Like, I'll do it, but begrudgingly. Like I'll do it, but I'm going to whine and resist every step of the way. Like when Jesus speaks to me with authority in my life, when the church speaks in authority into my life, what is my position in front of him when he speaks? Do I recognize this dynamic of freedom? Do I recognize that when he speaks to me with authority, he's trying to make me more free, not less? And it's through like the constraint of the musical instrument, like the discipline to the craft. And then freedom emerges. Like the ability of true expression emerges. Like when Jesus speaks to me with authority, what is my position in front of him? Do I resist and fight every step of the way, like the unclean spirit, incapable of worship, of loving what is? Or do I follow like a disciple? This is the question that each of us has to ask. Like this is the question that like Jesus is asking you, is when he speaks into you with authority, which more often than not is painful. It's not easy for us because we live this resistance. We see authority as a bad thing because we've lived painful examples of authority. But like when he speaks to you with authority and calls you to things, like what is your position in front of him? Do you recognize that he's trying to lead you to freedom, or are you resisting every step of the way? Like this is the drama that each of us has to live. Like this is the question each of us has to ask about my position in front of him, because he's trying to lead me to freedom. God bless.